Hello. This video serves to clarify my previous Target Exposed videos because the story is long and complicated and I get all mixed up while telling it. By the way, these are my opinions only, but I wish to share them as a matter of public interest. First, I want to clarify that I only brought up my financial situation because it's hardly inspirational when someone with a savings quits their job, and I just wanted to emphasize that there is more than one way to be poor. Now let me give a hopefully coherent overview of my experience. I already had a bad impression of Target as an employer when my former partner was hired as a lead. He was promised $16 an hour after he trains in all the departments for 6 months, which actually took well over a year, even though he was working as a lead in his own department the entire time. For $10 an hour and crappy hours, Target always had a BS excuse. That was around 2017-2018. Then holiday season 2019, I started working at Target part-time for extra cash and an opportunity to eventually transfer. Then COVID hit in March. While numerous small businesses closed forever, all of Target was deemed essential. Only a small portion of the store actually sells essential items. Why were they allowed to stay fully operational? My job was exclusively to quote-unquote zone, which is just straightening the product on the shelf. Is that essential? To get our hands on every single product to make it look pretty? How about a sign that says, "Hey, we apologize for the sloppy shelves in order to keep the staff safe"? I would have quit, but that would have threatened the unemployment income from my primary job. Then I transferred. It was intended to be temporary, but ended up being a favorable situation, or so I thought. I was working as a quote-unquote business owner in a department I enjoyed, and I had a leader who saw how hard I was working. He would routinely extend my schedule so I got the hours I needed. However, if you were on vacation, I would be screwed. If you work paycheck to paycheck, you know how detrimental a difference of 10 hours 1 week can be. At some point, I thought I would have earned, by hard work, consistent dependability, and a great attitude, the security of being scheduled 40 hours in the first place. If you work in the general merchandise department, you are either assigned a section of the store to own, or you are scheduled with a general label of GM. Business owners don't get additional compensation, just additional responsibility. The only reward is the semi-regular daytime schedule, but at the same time, your hours are limited by the quote-unquote workload, while the general GM schedule is unlimited. Both positions are more or less the same exact job. Ideally, the two simply have different priorities. One prioritizes freight, the other prioritizes appearance and accuracy, and the lead should supervise and ultimately be held responsible. Of course, this is not the case. Leaders never check anyone's work but the business owners, and hold them responsible for everything. Even if you prove it, the leader's word trumps the team members always, but there's no accountability system for them. So business owners get screwed. No matter how hard you work or don't, your schedule won't be impacted either way. You won't be rewarded or disciplined either way. I tell them it is dehumanizing to be scheduled according to letters on a page, because their excuse is always, well, how will we organize the letters? Well, they seem to find a way for pretty girls. And of course, when someone calls in sick and they have to move us around, suddenly those letters aren't so important. But they can do whatever they want because there is no transparency. Who and or what determines who is scheduled as a business owner versus general GM? How are workloads determined when they are dramatically inconsistent? How does one get promoted to leader? What is the criteria for employee of the month? HR will come around periodically to make sure you are getting the hours you need. But somehow we always loop back around to the same workload BS. What was the point of the conversation? Okay, well then, can I switch departments? Well, we love you where you are. You know the area so well. Well, then why can't I get general GM hours and you can use me somehow? Why do people with less seniority get 40 hours? Well, we don't schedule according to seniority. We schedule according to availability. Wait, my availability is 100% open. And you just told me you like me where I am because I know the area. Isn't that just another way of saying I add value because of my seniority? Oh, cue for them to run away. HR, of course, has a complete conflict of interest. The store managers in HR's offices are directly across from each other. There is no such thing as a closed-door meeting, when the manager is within earshot and the meeting is shouted, not whispered. Which leads me to my experience with HR. I left a note for whoever's going to be working in my area. Confucius say man or woman who overstocks will get tattled on. Please respect the well-maintained area while I'm gone. Thank you, smiley face. Was that a terribly inappropriate note? My leader said HR needed to be included in all communication between team members. So when a coworker overstepped their boundaries with me, I dutifully went to HR and simply told them what happened. By the way, there is an HR lead and an HR team member. I made a point not to involve the HR lead so they wouldn't make a big deal out of it. But they insisted on being involved and made a big deal out of it. That coworker went from being a little creepy to full-on hostile. He would play an aggressive chicken game, glare at me, complain to the leads about me, and throw any freight he had of mine at my feet. When HR came to follow up, it was in one ear and out the other. So I told my leader about it, and she would gossip with me about it, but didn't address it for 4 months until I got fed up and demanded it. By the way, they would also gossip about very personal things involving team members. Unprompted, tell me about others' issues with alcoholism, family suicide, and past work history. And you know those people talk about you that way too. I'm guessing that's why her work friends always glare at me. So, back to my leader who would extend my hours. At first I thought he was my buddy, until I finally saw the elaborate game for what it was. I highly recommend Dr. Ramani's YouTube channel about narcissism. It changed my life. I think it is important to know that human traffickers, child groomers, and cult leaders all use these same manipulation tactics: scouting, luring, grooming, coercion, and exploitation. The manipulator is trying to gain psychological control in order to benefit somehow. This is also what an abusive relationship might look like. And in the less extreme situations, maybe just someone to toy with, which they can do endlessly by picking the right target, which is scouting, using guilt and self-doubt against someone with low self-esteem, while appearing kind to everyone else, who in turn enable the narcissist by invalidating the victim. They will find out what you want to hear, luring, so they can be the one to tell you. They will find out what makes you insecure, so they can feed into it, and thus slowly gain your trust and admiration, which is the grooming. At which point they start playing mind games, which is coercion, by playing hot and cold and sending mixed messages, so the victim is eager to win back their favor. Eventually they break down the victim's self-esteem, so they may take advantage and control the victim, which is exploitation. Looking back, it was all so smart and methodical. He would always find ways to compliment me that centered around recognizing my greatness. He was borderline flirtatious, but carefully framed it as admiration, which fed into my need for approval from authority. He noticed all kinds of details about my work and mannerisms, which made me feel special. He was the one who got me the hours I needed, so he was my hero. On the flip side, he would often remind me of Target's mental health services at very odd times, which always felt like a red flag, which is insults framed as advice. After my incident with HR, the hot and cold game began, and I thought the two might be related. During his hot phases, he would routinely offer to sit with me if I ever just wanted to talk. I eventually took him up on it after a particularly confusing incident. We both have playful energies at work, which he would encourage. So one day I came to work covered in accessories, after he spent a day teasing me about how I over-accessorize. It was very well received, and we laughed, and later that day he asked if I would work the next day. Oh, do I get to bring a cart full of accessories for everyone? Oh, that goes without saying. Well, I love an opportunity to laugh at work, so I go to the dollar store and I bring in a bag of accessories the next day. Strange vibes. My next shift, he sends over a different leader to admonish me. That's just what Mr. Buttface told me to tell you. So confusing. So I take him up on his offer to have a meeting and chat, and he tells me I'm his #1 priority that day. I explain that I'm confused about the accessories and uncomfortable about who knows what with the HR coworker situation, and he stares at me awkwardly, like unblinkingly, and says nothing the entire time. This is a technique called stonewalling, and it is a very effective in casting self-doubt. When I finish, he assures me I'm imagining things, tells me I'm great, and rushes out the door, and then gives me the silent treatment for weeks. When he starts talking to me again, he compares me to other team members and tells me why others are his favorite. I suspect strange things like when my water bottle goes missing, and he makes random announcements about hydration. He makes a point to joke around me but not include me. And I start to notice this pattern that the days I'm in a really good mood are the same days he has some kind of bad news or some kind of rule that only applies to me. And every time I become suspicious of him, he acts like my best friend again, all the while offering me the much-needed hours. This goes on for a long time, until, Dr. Ramani, thank you again. So at which point I finally contact the quote-unquote integrity team. I know enough about toxic leaders that they will try to start a record against you for BS reasons. So I made my own record as a defensive move. I learned that this leader has already been reported against numerous times, so I'm not expecting anything to come of it. And eventually this leader moves away. And we are excited to see how things will improve, except for me, they get much worse. Now that Mr. Toxic is no longer there to extend my hours, but they still have the expectations of me, I have this same conversation over and 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 over, seriously, too many times. Why has your workload not been getting done? Because I'm not getting the same hours, because so-and-so used to extend my hours. I even take a screenshot of my average hours worked for the past quarter. Mr. Toxic was able to manipulate me for months and months and always managed to keep me in self-doubt. A part of me is impressed by that. But the rest of management is just blatantly toxic, and for me this is worse. Why do these monkeys get to be the boss of me? I am so fed up with Target at this point that without at least getting the hours I need, I have no tolerance for all the heaps and heaps of BS that we just routinely accept and deal with. So I emailed Integrity about the following because I wanted it on record. Safety, bullying, harassment, inconsistent treatment, toxic leaders of all varieties. Basically, you can check off every item on the following list of toxic leadership. Be on the lookout at your own job. They don't believe rules apply to them. They're in it solely for personal enrichment. Their ego is always the motivation. No matter how hard you work, you feel like you're not enough. It feels like an upside-down universe where the things that should matter, like productivity and excellence, don't seem to. Deeply invalidating. They avoid answering questions. They confuse, redirect attention, and avoid taking responsibility for their behavior. They will use your emotions against you. They will humiliate you and insult you to produce feelings of worthlessness. They will infantilize you and disregard your maturity. They will set fires and take advantage of the chaos just to look like the hero by putting it out. They may pretend to have ADHD like our leader did, but ADHD isn't quite as selective. They enjoy seeing victims in stressful situations. They require everyone to communicate through the leader. Favoritism and cliques. By the way, Target gave out secret bonuses and they don't announce lead openings. They create alliances, have secret meetings, leave people off emails, they gossip, foster distrust, feed the narrative everyone wants to hear. They play on your guilt and self-doubt. It is very powerful to believe that your words have finally gotten through to them, but narcissists are not able to self-regulate or self-govern. They always need an enemy. Me. Targets of narcissists are often those with borderline personality disorder, especially those who have been scapegoats. And if you're good at setting boundaries, then they turn it on you, gaslight you, manipulate you, etc. Me, 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 me. The constant lack of recognition is enough to affect your self-esteem, so it might sound like a small thing, but when the leaders rub it in your face that they are above the rules, it's very hard to deal with. They criticize you for not immediately responding to the walkie. They constantly roll their eyes at you for being different. You are made to feel very less than if you are neurodivergent, introverted, woman, queer. Now that's what I can personally speak on, but I'm sure that list is longer. You know, in spite of their t-shirts, love is love or Black Lives Matter that just pander to their customers. For 25 years, Target donated to and had a special relationship with the police department in Minneapolis, the city of Target's headquarters and where George Floyd was murdered. Their claim to be fighting crime was allegedly just cleaning up certain neighborhoods to make them more appealing to shoppers. Crime was down, but shoppers didn't like the people on the streets. In essence, Target maintains a class discrepancy with low wages to their workforce and instead funnels that money into the police force in order to unfairly persecute the black community and keep them away from the pretty stores. Now, after George Floyd's death, Target is pouring money into the Black community, but only because their actions were discovered. It's an effort to save their brand and business, not to do the right thing. Allegedly, of course. Yes, we want to see corporations take responsibility for their actions, but should they really be celebrated for righting the wrong they caused in the first place? If, for example, Bill Cosby gave a little money to his victims and then publicized it in an obvious promotion for a new comedy special, would we be cheering and waiting in line to watch it? Well, I hope not. I would love to know how Target is actually supporting these causes, rather than simply benefiting off of them. Like, isn't the point of Pride to stand in solidarity and not hide? I first worked at this massive Target store in Utah Valley, one of the biggest stores in the country in a notoriously conservative place. I had no idea we sold Pride merchandise until I transferred to Oregon. Utah LGBTQ youth could have used the support. The suicide rate there has tripled since 2007. Target is strategically profiting off Pride in progressive cities and quietly hiding their support in conservative ones. Way to be an ally, Target. I brought up my neurodivergence to integrity simply to point out how leaders should respect their team's differences, their strengths, and their weaknesses, out of respect. And they responded with a form for disability. Wait, I need a doctor's note for you to stop rolling your eyes at me? I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm more than capable of doing this job. So when they inappropriately make jokes on the walkie all day long, it's very triggering. HR told them to stop and they stopped for 1 week. Integrity told them to stop and they stopped for a month. They are shady. If you work before opening, sometimes at 2 a.m. or 4 a.m., you need to be let in. The early birds are already waiting at the door, and if you don't go in with them, as the leaders see you approaching, they turn around, lock the door, and walk away, even though you're not late. Our store has been broken into twice. I was approached by homeless people on 3 occasions. They have called for security to check on suspicious characters in the parking lot numerous times. But why should they be concerned about our safety? How dare we not respect every minute of Their Majesty the Leader's time? Safety is a joke. There's fire hazards, slip hazards, fall hazards, boxes falling on your head hazards. They have a specific policy that if a team member has a no-call, no-show, leaders cannot call them. They do not have a policy against calling us on our personal devices, by the way. They do it all the time. They have no explanation as to why. If a dependable worker doesn't show up, shouldn't Target be concerned about them? If a dependable worker has a variable schedule, shouldn't they be understanding about a mix-up? There is no logical reason for it. The consequence of their absence is being short-staffed. So Target should call them so they can come in for the shift and then they won't be short-staffed. It appears to be this bizarre, intentionally vindictive policy, and the epiphany I had was how this all is seemingly intentional. I just couldn't understand why Target wouldn't build a smarter structure, an employee-centric model that would radiate benefits to all. Because they hound us like dogs, even though so much time and therefore money could be spared, with just smarter delegation, an accountability system, and a reward structure. Turnover is expensive. Are they that stupid and out of touch? Or is there a cost benefit in their favor over the long run by keeping the workforce at large hopeless and depressed? One of the articles I sent to quote-unquote integrity explained that the #1 reason people steal is opportunity. Target obviously knows this, that's why they have an asset protection team. I believe this is the #1 reason people take advantage of leadership roles as well, opportunity. And there is nothing but opportunity at Target. So while there's a lot of focus on COVID management, safety, and wages, which is great of course, I want to highlight the importance of protecting our mental health as well as our livelihood. The current suicide rate is higher than the death from war and murder combined. Just like we don't allow our bodies to be vulnerable to predators in doctors' offices and classrooms, etc., I insist we don't allow it to be open hunting season on our mental health. All day, every day at work. And I just want to finish by saying, since the start of COVID, schools have closed and kids' education and psychological health were profoundly impacted. Small family-owned community businesses permanently closed forever. And the death toll is 5.6 million. We all make sacrifices. But Target gets to go ahead with business as usual. Fuck Target. Please go to Target Workers Unite to support the unionization efforts. Thank you for listening.